I'm Matt Vaadi. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CEO of ERG Payroll and HR here in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm going to be the host for this evening's interview, and I could not be more excited to welcome our guest, Laura Boccanfuso, good friend, founder, and CEO of Van Robotics. And she is coming to us fresh off a recent appearance on Shark Tank. We're going to dive into that and so much more. Grow Camp webinars are from GrowCo. It is our monthly educational session geared towards helping entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs 10x the way they think about their business, opportunities, and potential. All right, so Laura, we have all seen the show. It's probably my favorite television show of all time because I'm a hardcore entrepreneur. It's on the DVR of every entrepreneur in America. We have all thought about what it would be like to walk out and down that long hallway and stand in front of the sharks. Take us to that moment. What was it like walking out there?
Walking out was extremely nerve-wracking. You know, you have a camera, right? I mean, you really don't think about it when you watch the show, but there's a camera that is right in your personal space. You know what I mean? So it is a little disconcerting. You make that walk down the hallway and it's longer than you think it's going to be. And there's that camera that they tell you under no you're not supposed to look at. So that is always, that's not something I really expected to happen. So it is very nerve-wracking to go through that process. Yeah.
So walk us through getting on the show, everything that's happened between when you originally got involved and then up until today. What has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, so actually it's interesting, right? We'd just gotten out of Techstars, and maybe 6 months later, not even, maybe 4 months later, somebody from Shark Tank contacted us. It was Max Swedlow, who was the producer, and it just said, hey, heard about your company, think it's really cool, think you might be a good contestant and a good, candidate to come on Shark Tank. So I thought it was spam. I thought it was a complete hoax, and I didn't answer the email. He completely ignored it. And then I got another email message from him, and he said, hey, I don't know if you got my first message, but this is Max from Shark Tank, and you might want to email me back if you're interested. So I sent a very, very curt, kind of short message and just said, yeah, okay, sure, send me some information, let's hop on a call. That was it. And sure enough, turned out to be the real deal, and went through a 6-month process really to get on the show. So there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of preparing that needs to take place, not just in terms of getting yourself ready for the pitch itself, but also all of the legalities, all the documentation, all the details of how the show works. And basically, it was a 6-month process, a lot of practicing, a lot of paperwork. And since then, I mean, we filmed that back in September. A lot of people don't know how wide that window is, but it's a pretty long time. For some people, it could be just like a couple months, but for us, it was really almost 6 months since the time it was filmed to the time that it aired. And I tell you what, I'm grateful to no end that the producers didn't air it until they did, because it would have been a completely different reception had it aired back in September, October, November, when no one really knew anything about COVID and, really distance learning and all these things that we're now addressing with our product weren't even on anybody's radar. So it was really a blessing, actually, that they waited until March or April to notify us that, hey, you guys are going to be on Shark Tank. So your episode is actually going to air. So that was, I think it just kind of worked out as best as it could have.
That's amazing. Timing is everything, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And you hit on something else in there I'd like to talk a little bit about. And I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but you talked about how nervous you were going out there. You also hit on the fact that you were in Techstars. A lot of us suffer from the challenge of, the imposter syndrome and trying to overcome the nerves and have the courage that it takes to grow a business and stand up in front of people and make the pitch or make the ask or do the thing that puts you out there. How do you overcome those nerves personally? How do you do that?
I mean, I don't know. I'd love to know. If somebody has any good advice on that, I'd love to hear it. I just push through, I don't give into it, because I think, fear can keep us from doing some really great things. And one of the one of the big, I think, responsibilities we have to ourselves is to live the best life we can, and to not let other people convince you that you can't, regardless of who they are, what their position is, how much money they make, or where they come from. So I think, you just ignore the fear. You just have to push through it. So I don't know how you, because I tell you, I'm not kidding when I say it was terrifying, just getting, knowing you were going to walk down the hallway and stand in front of all those, cameras and all of that kind of stuff. So
With all of your investor pitches and Techstars and Shark Tank and everything else, it feels like you eat fear for breakfast, Laura.
yeah. Well, I don't shy away from it. That's the truth. I don't. I think one of the early lessons I had way early on when I started the company, and I don't know, others have probably, or maybe have had this experience, but when you start, you kind of put people on a pedestal when you go talk to them, and you think, oh, they know so much more than me. They have so much more experience than I do. They're more, they have more influence. They have more power, whatever it is, right? You talk yourself into this idea that somehow they're on a pedestal and you're here just, asking for money or whatever. And I've learned that is patently untrue. They're not on a pedestal. And you know more about your company and about your product than anybody else. So being armed with that knowledge and understanding and confidence, I feel like you have to just remind yourself of that when you go through like these very trying and intimidating sort of events or opportunities.
Absolutely. That's great advice, and definitely a great takeaway for anybody watching is just powering through, pushing through that fear, and understanding that you're just talking to another human being and they've got a job to do. And sometimes that job is to say no to 98% of people, and understanding that does not really make you unique. That makes you in the top 98%, right? So that's great feedback, Laura. Appreciate that. And hindsight will teach you that you know a lot more about your product than probably anybody ever will know. And it's your job to make sure you can accurately teach them about it. So, well, let's put a bow on the Shark Tank piece. What was your biggest takeaway from that whole experience?
The biggest positive takeaway, I think that we don't always know we don't always know the impact of what we're doing at the time, right? Like I said, I mean, no one knew COVID was going to happen. This was it's been a life-changing event and crisis for so many people. And it's put people through dragged people through the mud. Honestly, people have lost their jobs. There's been devastating effects because of it. And there's also been some silver linings. We've seen the best come out in people. People have stepped up to help people. People have, transformed their companies and pivoted to meet the needs of, people who are in hurting and really needing help. So for me, the biggest takeaway was you just never know the impact of what you're doing when you're doing it. And sometimes, you just have to like I said, you just have to do what you think is best, even though it may not have the greatest impact at that moment. Somewhere down the road, it may, right? It may be the right time for that thing that you did 6 months ago, a year ago, that seed that you planted to really grow and to really transform your company, your life in a really good way. So
That's fantastic.
That's probably the biggest takeaway.
It's about embracing the journey, not the destination, right? That's fantastic.
Right.
Well, on that end, so for the last 4 years, you've been working hard to get ABii in front of as many students as possible. Your passion for the difference that your team can make in a child's life is contagious. We all saw it on television. We've seen it throughout town. What has been the high point of that journey?
Of the journey of the whole
the whole thing since you've got started with Van Robotics?
The high point, seeing your product in use, like seeing it in the market, people coming back to you saying they love it and they want more. That is like, I mean, I don't know how you can that and sell that, but that is like the pinnacle, right? Because if you really believe in what you're doing, if you really believe in strongly that you're making a difference, or you're doing what you love to do, it's your passion. When you see that start to have that kind of that return, where people are telling you, they love it, they want it, they've been looking for this, they want to buy more of it. That is incredibly gratifying. It's probably, I mean, it doesn't get old, right? Like you'll go, we have a robot now in St. Jude's Hospital, and it was just tremendously humbling to be able to help this robot. It was actually purchased through a foundation and then donated to St. Jude's. But hearing their feedback about how they're using it, how the kids just light up when they come in the room with the robot, like that is that's so great, right? Like that's what we do this for. That's why we're in business.
So talking about the journey, let's hear a little bit about that. Your journey is different than many of us in that I don't think you just start this business 4 years ago and then a month later you've got a robot on a shelf, right? How long is it in your world before I can see my product making an impact in somebody's life? How long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I started this project way back when I was in grad school, right? When I was at USC and I was a grad student, I was developing technology that would help kids with autism. And that was really the seedling, right? Like that was the very beginning, the genesis of the idea, like, oh, wow, technology really has this big impact on kids, especially kids with special needs and kids that have trouble concentrating, focusing, paying attention. That's, and so all of the R&D that I did for like the next 10 years, I think has really, given me the confidence that like the technology is solid. We know it's been tested and we know what works and doesn't work. So, I mean, the product itself has been a long time in coming. The company, I don't know, I'll let you know if we ever get there, but I think, being able to launch it from having all of that background was a pretty fast process. Like by the time I left my position in at Yale in 2017, it was a really quick turnaround. 2 years later, we had a commercial product. So we did manufacturing, we did the product development, we did the design. I hired a team of people. We had the software development, we did the marketing, we did the grants, right? We did all of that in 2 years. And now we have like product on people's desks. So that's like, I think it's, attributed to the fact that we spent so much time like developing the idea of the product and testing it right in the market before.
Well, I think there's some great messages there when you talk about that validation of the idea, making sure that there's a market for what you're building. And when you've got a market, you know that 2 years seems like a small amount of time. Because to me, 2 years would seem like an eternity, right? But for you, you're like, oh, it's just 2 years and it was ready to go. So that's fantastic. Yeah. And as we look backwards over that journey, so we talked about a high point over the last 4 years since you started Van Robotics. What about a low point? What was your low point and how did you overcome that?
Fundraising in a nutshell. Fundraising sucks. Fundraising, especially for a female run company, is an uphill battle. And I know I say that and it's probably cliche and people say it all the time, but I mean, it's true. It's been my experience that fundraising has been remarkably difficult. It is hard for everyone, but there's no, there's a reason why only 2% of VC funding goes to female run companies, right? 2%. That's it. So, I mean, there are statistics that back up my personal experience. And so, you put your best foot forward and you try the hardest you can, but sometimes it just is like a gut punch. It is really devastating when you've got the market, you feel like you've done so much work to develop this product and the market validation, that people want it. And you feel strongly that, if you found the right person, the right investors, that you could make that a reality. So that was probably my lowest point, probably just before we were able to raise our seed round last year. There were a couple months there where I thought, like, is this even going to come together? Is this going to work? How are we going to get this off the ground? These little grants are great, but we really need an infusion of capital to take it to the next level, to bring this actual product to market. So that was probably the lowest point for me.
Well, it's a fantastic story because as we know, it's darkest before the dawn. We're always willing to stop like just a few inches short of the finish line. So great story of persistence and now to see that success has been awesome. I've been loving watching your journey. So one of the parts about your journey that always makes me feel highly insecure when I talk to you is your impressive academic background. So you're a PhD, you've worked in the university systems, you've done research work at Yale. How has that helped you to be a better entrepreneur? Do you think it has?
Definitely. Yeah. For most PhD students, I think they'll tell you, it's all about problem solving, because you don't get a lot of you don't get hand holding when you're in grad school for the most part. It's like, you get your PhD or you don't. There's not that many people that are going to be adversely affected if you don't finish, right? So they're like, yeah, it would be nice if you finished your PhD, but if you don't, like, join the other crowd of people that didn't finish it, like, no problem, bye. So I think, in a sense, the idea that you're going to have to figure out stuff you don't know, like, yeah, you don't know about taxes, figure it out. You don't know how to set up this thing that you need to set up for your company, figure it out, right? Like, there are people who do know, there's resources, and you're going to have to figure that out. So I think the academic background has been helpful, specifically in that respect, is that, yeah, you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be on that learning curve, and you just need to embrace that.
That's awesome. That hunger for knowledge seems like it's translated for you, but I'm confused. They didn't just send you the playbook when you started your business that told you about all these elements of running a business? I got it in the mail right when I signed up.
And I knew I was missing something, Matt. Y'all are holding out on me. You guys didn't share the playbook. Jeez.
Oh man, City of Columbia. I'm blaming them.
Great.
Just kidding. All right, so they sent me mine. I got it. All right, so talk to us about what's going on in your world right now, Laura. What are you most excited about right this moment?
We are just rolling with incoming interest from districts across the country that saw us either on Shark Tank or have heard about us through various resellers, distributors, affiliates that we're working with in the school systems. So we're super excited because we were doing a lot of legwork to get robots in classrooms last year, and this year a lot of that work is coming back to sort of to pay us back sort of in returns, because those people that we initially sold those robots are now coming back for more, because this massive, this COVID crisis is creating a massive academic slide that has got a lot of people really worried about what they're going to be facing in the fall. So students coming back in the classrooms in the fall are going to be larger numbers of students that are farther behind, and the delta between students is going to be greater. So some kids have been reading and they'll keep up with their work, but some kids have had zero academic instruction for 3 months, going on 4 months now. So if you think about the impact of that, it's fueling a lot of interest in our company right now for larger numbers of sales, larger district sales, district-wide sales, and so that's really exciting. We're really happy that we can meet that need.
That's amazing. And we've talked about that story of persistence that it's taken to get you where you are today. Let's rewind just a second. About how many investor pitches would you say you've done in your career?
I have a spreadsheet, actually. I have the exact number. I haven't looked at it in a while. I would say probably, 100, maybe a little bit less than 100. Oh.
So what would that make the conversion rate on those pitches?
You know what?
Not to put you on the spot there, but probably
very
2
low.
to 3%, maybe. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have to go get my laptop charger. I'll be right back. Really sorry. It's about to die.
That's okay. Real life problems coming in the middle of Grow Camp. So fantastic lessons here from Laura as we talk about what it takes to really run a business versus what we think it takes to run a business, right? We think it's come up with a product, go to market, people want it. If you build it, they will come. Whereas in reality, it takes 100 pitches, it takes relentless effort over an extended period of time. It takes some good timing sometimes, but that timing doesn't come unless you're still alive to make the play. So tremendous lessons here from Laura, and a lot that can be learned regardless of whether you're building robots or you're doing bookkeeping. These things apply. So Laura, I was just burning some eggs for you there while you went and got your charger.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I didn't realize
no
this is that one.
Very real life issues. That's okay, especially in a Zoom world that we're now in. All right. So if you could share one message with an entrepreneur that's just getting going, or maybe they're hitting that bump in the road where they're getting to that point where they're going, you know what, I think I've had enough. What would that message be?
I would say, don't look for outward validation, right? From investors or from from people from other entrepreneurs, for example. Do your homework, know your product, know your service better than anybody else. Like, research it, test it, prove it to yourself, prove it beyond reasonable doubt, right? When somebody says, oh, it doesn't work, or nobody wants that, have your homework done. I think that's probably the most important thing, because you're going to come up against a lot of haters, right? You're going to get people who are, or on the other side, right? You might get people who just tell you what you want to hear because they want to be nice. So just, I would say, invest in a lot of your time, your effort, and your focus on knowing your product, knowing your service, testing it, so that when people do challenge you, you have a strong footing to remember to stand back on. I think that's probably the best advice I would have given myself, way back when too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So not looking for validation from people who aren't your customer, right? And understanding that the second that you put yourself out in front of an audience, somebody's not going to like you. Get over it. That's part of the deal. And we talk about it all the time. If you're an entrepreneur and somebody gives you a microphone, you better stand up and talk, because exactly. it's an opportunity to promote your product or whatever you do. So fantastic lessons here, Laura. We've talked about pushing through the nerves and the fear. We've talked about the persistence that it takes. We've talked about what it means to validate a market and make sure that your idea is solid, so that you've got such a great validated market. 2 years feels like a single day in the grand scheme of things, right? When you look back at it. So it's a tremendous success for you. We're so excited for everything you've done. If people are looking to connect with you, where should they go to find you, Laura?
Yeah, just shoot me an email message. I think that's probably the best way. It's just laura@myvanrobot.com.
Awesome. Laura at myvanrobot.com. And I know Erin's going to have tons of resources for everybody in the follow-up and in the chat and all sorts of stuff. I've been seeing all sorts of things pop up on my screen throughout here, so I'm sure she's sharing tons of resources. Any parting words of wisdom for the folks before we let them go have a beer on their Friday night, or stay in here and have a beer?
Don't drink and drive. Stay home. Enjoy your weekend. It's supposed to be a little bit nicer this weekend, hopefully. So yeah, I don't have any parting words of wisdom beyond just, take care of yourselves. That's first and foremost.
That's awesome. Thanks, Laura. We genuinely appreciate the time, and it's an honor and a privilege always every time I get to speak with you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you both for having me. Appreciate it.